Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. It's now abundantly clear that a series of security lapses, some inexplicable, perhaps a few unforgivable, lie behind the Uri terror attack. Tonight we shall take a close look at those lapses and ask, how serious were they, why did they happen, and what steps must be taken in response. My guests are two former Corps commanders of 15th Corps who know the Uri Army base extremely well. Lieutenant General J.S. Dhillon, who joins us from Chandigarh, and Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain here in studio in Delhi. I'm also joined by the Director of the Society for Policy Studies, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, and a distinguished fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, Manoj Joshi. General Dhillon, the terror attack in Uri happened at a time when the army was on high alert because of the unrest in the Kashmir Valley. And secondly, it happened just days after the Intelligence Bureau had informed the army that Pakistani terrorists had plans to strike in the area or vicinity of Uri. Yet instead of being alert and prepared, the army base proved to be an easy target. Does that suggest serious security lapses?
Well, such lapses are unacceptable. There's no doubt there have been serious lapses onto that. Army requires no intelligence to defend itself. In areas like this, where there's always something on, we have to be always alert. Intelligence feed in or no feed in, it makes no difference. We have detailed instructions laid down for every unit, that whether in peace, whether sitting in Delhi, Chandigarh, or in a field area, what action, what measures to take so that you are not surprised. So here they were surprised, so there have been security lapses, we suffered, units suffered. But having said that, the subsequent action by the Corps headquarters in flying in the para-commandos, subsequent action by the troops who had been mauled by the militants, ensure that in a short period all the 4 militants were killed, which is a very good achievement.
Absolutely, but General Dhillon, for now, let's stick to the security lapses because that is the focus of our discussion tonight. It's so important that I do not want to dilute the focus by trying to bring in a few brownie points here and there. General Hasnain, you tweeted that and this was as early as the 8th of September, you specifically warned the commander of the Uri base that a terror attack was likely, as you said, as a way of reducing the army's pressure on the Kashmiri hinterland. Now, I put it to you, either your warning wasn't taken seriously, or if it was taken seriously, then the terrorists outsmarted the army. It can't be a third thing. Which of the two?
Karan, first of all, let me endorse every word which has been spoken by my senior Corps commander, General Dhillon. Deep regrets at the loss, deep regrets that there were inadequacies in protection, etc., at the tactical and the sub-tactical level. But this doesn't take away some other important issues which I need to highlight to you. I have commanded that brigade and I have commanded this corps also, and therefore I've looked at it from both the angles. There has always been a mindset, and I'm saying that even someone like me has suffered with that mindset, that Uri, Tangdhar and places like that are havens of peace because the population is all with us.
The Pahadis and
the Gujar population, right? And the focus, therefore, has been entirely on the line of control, on the counter-infiltration, on the sanctification of the line of control, on operations.
So complacency set in at the base.
Absolutely, this is what happens. Now, if you want your manpower all deployed on top, then there will be somewhere where you will be weak. To make up for that, you need to have either technology to do that.
I'll come to how you make up in a moment's time. But is it because of complacency setting in, or the mindset that your tweet was either ignored, or if preparations were taken, the terrorists outsmarted them? Because there's only one of the two.
Karan, if I can admit one thing, that even as a brigade commander there, I always felt vulnerable. And I always felt that my inadequacies would somehow allow the terrorists to get the better of me.
Absolutely, but also what is added to your point that even in your time you felt vulnerable. Now, despite the alerts, despite your specific tweet to the commander, he either didn't take your tweet seriously, or if he did, the terrorists outsmarted his preparations. It's one or the other.
Well,
I keep repeating it.
Yes, the terrorists will outsmart you at some stage or the other.
And they did here. And they did here.
I admit that.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, in an article that you wrote for the Indian Express yesterday, you said a very serious operational lapse had taken place. Now, in fact, the Uri attack involved two separate breaches of security fencing. First on the LOC and then at the perimeter of the army base. Doesn't this mean that what it exposes is a double vulnerability, not one but two?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair way of characterizing what has happened. But let me add, Karan, that as far as the tactical detail is concerned, I think both General Dhillon and General Ata Hasnain have spelt out the complexity and the kind of tactical challenges that any unit has to address while looking at the line of control and whatever be the other tasking that they have. I raised this point more, I would say, as a security analyst, and it was a question that I think everyone in India was asking, saying that we had gone through the Pathankot experience, and then we have Uri, and I want to pick up this word that Ata Hasnain used about being outsmarted. Clearly, this group of 4 terrorists had an intelligence advantage. The very fact that they were able to ingress, whether it was 20 kilometers from one direction or 6 kilometers from the Hajipir side, they had been able to enter the Indian side of the line of control and get access right up to the tents. Now, was it possible because of some kind of information that had been made available to them from this side? And if so, what were the kind of procedures that needed to be put into place? These are the kind of questions that come
I'll
to
stop
mind.
you there. Commodore Bhaskar, we'll come to the question of procedures in a moment's time. At the moment, let's stick to that first point you made. You're clearly suggesting, although you're doing it delicately, that they may have had an informant. And if they had an informant or a helper or someone giving them information, that person is a mole. That's what you're clearly suggesting.
I suggested this yesterday in my article, Karan, saying that if there is insider information that is being made available, it adds to the complexity of the challenge. And I also added the point that when you're defending this kind of a position, zero error, I said, is a statistical oxymoron.
But the point I want to pick up is that if they had inside information supplied by someone inside who's a mole, it adds to the depth of the security lapse. It adds to the depth of how things went critically wrong on the Indian side. Manoj Joshi, let's focus for a moment on the breach of the fence surrounding the army base. Yesterday's Times of India says this raises several questions. First, the paper says, did the terrorists have knowledge of the camp's layout? Secondly, were they able to identify stretches where the fence was not properly manned, thus making it easy for them to break through? And thirdly, did they have a mole inside? The question that Commodore Bhaskar has raised. Those now look like very important, if embarrassing, questions. But because they're embarrassing, we can't avoid answering them.
Well, what I can say is that when it comes to the mole, that's a matter of investigation. I'm sure the National Investigating Agency will try and see if there is such a thing and can track them down. But what I would suggest in terms of modus operandi of an operation like this, you know, this would have been perhaps practiced several times over in POK or Pakistan, or wherever these guys were trained. They would have, even as far as the Uri Brigade headquarters is concerned, my suspicion is that they would have built a mock-up. And actually, you know, with satellite pictures and human intelligence, you can actually recreate the whole scenario there, practice your attacks. And after all, these attacks are not taking place too frequently. So you have a group of people who are tasked for a specific thing and trained for it. And so it's not that, you know, commando raids usually do that kind of stuff. So it's quite possible that the Uri Brigade headquarters had been targeted well before this had happened. And
can I stop you there, Manoj? Manoj, there's a flip side to the point you're making. Manoj, I'm interrupting you because there's a flip side to the point you're making. I accept that the terrorists had been trained, that they'd been trained on models of the Uri camp in Pakistan, and so they came knowing what they had to do and how to do it. But equally, the Uri camp ought to have been trained how to protect itself. After all, they should have been aware that the other side can build models and models of their camp, and they should have therefore been prepared how to protect themselves. And in this instance, General Hasnain tweeted to the commander to make him aware. There was intelligence as well from the IB, and there was a general alert in the valley. Despite all of that, this has happened. That suggests that, as General Dhillon said, security was very poor, lapses were serious, questions have to be asked.
Well, Karan, I'd like to make one point here. In the past 2 or 3 years, there have been a number of attacks in the Jammu area, and the Pathankot was the culmination of that. And I have seen that the army has taken special precautions in that area. I visited the division last year, and I saw the kind of defenses that they had built, which was to prevent those kind of
maybe they
attacks.
took protection and they took special provisions elsewhere, but here they didn't. Let's talk about Uri. Let's not talk about other examples.
Yes, but that's the point I'm making, Karan. That's the point. That's what I'm saying, Karan, that the army moves very slowly. Standard operating procedures need to be very quickly assimilated right across the board. What happens here is that what's been done in Jammu has not been done elsewhere.
Well, that's another sort of lapse you're pointing out, that in fact, not only does the army move slowly, but the lessons it learns in one place, it doesn't implement in others, and that is another lapse on the part of the army, nothing else. General Dhillon, let me put this to you. The Uri attack happened when the 10th Dogras were being replaced by the 6th Bihar. Now, we all know that the turnover of units is a particularly vulnerable time. Yet, the terrorists not only knew this was happening, they were also able to exploit it to their benefit. Does that of itself suggest that there was some sort of inside help or information? Raw sources are today suggesting that maybe the porters in the area who are aware of these shifts in units happening had tipped the terrorists off. Others are speculating there may have been some sort of inside information. But is that another area where we need to look at the security lapse?
These two units, 10 Dogras and 6th Bihar, are very fine units. I'm surprised how they got into this type of a situation. Turnover of units is a normal thing which happens every year during summer, not only here, all over. And during that period, we insist on units that be very, very careful in taking over and take all precautions. But in spite of all that, our all logistics system, let's take at Uri, which Atta has been there, so many civilians are there with us, helping us out, they work with us, and through them then nothing can be hidden. It is only, even if they know it, so what? We have to be very careful, take precautions, take measures that even it is leaked out, so what? We should be able to withstand all that. And
Can I interrupt that, General Dhillon?
This attack which has taken place.
As you say, there are many people who are aware of what's happening, many people you work with, and if information leaks out, you should be able to handle and able to cope with that. Clearly, in Uri, they weren't. Why weren't they? Is that another level of complacency that set in, as General Hasnain was saying? Or is it because of inefficiency? Or is it because simply they didn't realize that they were vulnerable? Which of the three?
I think the truth is that our units were careless. They did not follow the laid down norms and resulted into that thing, and we don't have to make any excuses about it. We have to put it right so that it doesn't happen with any other unit later on.
How bad is carelessness at the unit at this level in Uri? How bad is carelessness?
Sorry, I didn't get it. Say again.
I said, how serious a lapse is carelessness, particularly when it happens at Uri, particularly when it happens at a time when there is a general alert and a specific terror alert. In those circumstances, how serious a lapse is carelessness?
As I said in the beginning itself, is a very serious lapse which cannot be ignored. It has to be put right.
Okay.
Look at it. It has embarrassed the Indian Army. It has embarrassed the nation at the international level. And our attention from the valley problem has now got diverted to what's happened at Uri. It is a very serious issue, and our leaders at various levels, right up to the highest level, have to ensure that these lapses do not take place.
Okay. General Hasnain, some newspapers, like the Business Standard today, suggest, and I'm quoting the Business Standard, the combat echelons of the 2 battalions at the Uri base had been posted to forward posts along the LOC leaving the camp's administrative and support staff virtually unguarded. In a sense, you hinted at this yourself, and you said this was a problem that was happening even when you were at Uri almost a decade ago. Is there a real sense in which we've frequently left the Uri base unguarded because the combat staff have gone to the border without realizing that we were creating a tempting target for terrorists?
Yes, Karan, but can I put this in perspective with bringing out an issue we earlier touched upon? Turnover of units does not make them vulnerable at the base. It makes them vulnerable at the LOC.
Okay.
This must be remembered.
Okay.
Here it was a turnover taking place at the base. The protection was still that of 10 Dogra there. Now, having said that, your other question relating to the aspect of how vulnerable it was at that particular time, I would say in my time also it was equally vulnerable at any time, because all the time the professionalism of the Indian Army demands that where your task is, send your troops there.
Which is the LOC.
On the LOC.
Which means also the same professionalism ipso facto leaves you vulnerable at your base.
There is an element of risk which we all take.
But then
I was aware of this.
But you're also saying something else. Inherent in this professionalism is in fact a vulnerability that now needs to be urgently tackled.
Absolutely. Karan, a principle of war is security. And also a principle of war, a virtual principle of war, is balance. You have to be balanced in your deployment and you have to be secure. You cannot wish that away.
Comrade Bhaskar, the Uri attack is in many respects rather worryingly similar to what happened in Pathankot in January. In fact, today's Business Standard, I'm quoting that newspaper again, says that since the start of 2015, there have been more than 10 similar episodes of varying intensity, but it doesn't give further details. Assuming that's correct, shouldn't alarm bells be ringing both in Army headquarters and the Defense Ministry?
No, I don't think alarm bells need to ring, because as far as the LOC is concerned and the way in which the Indian Army is deployed, it is fairly predictable that the other side, whether it is the Pakistani military, the intelligence agencies, or the groups that they support, would keep probing along the LOC, and where they find an opportunity, they would get in and do what they have done.
You're saying to
but I do
me
want to suggest,
that
Karan,
10 breaches of security since January 2015 is not an alarming situation?
it's not alarming primarily for the reason that I suggested earlier, that when you adopt a defensive posture, the adversary has to find one chink and get in, which is why I suggested
But he seems to find that chink successfully and repeatedly. And isn't that alarming? It's not a one-off finding of the chink. The adversary finds it successfully, repeatedly, and within a space, it seems, of 18 months, 10 times.
Well, I'm just suggesting, Karan, that it's not alarming in my lexicon. It is something that needs to be addressed and reviewed tactically.
All right.
But I would like to suggest
we are
that
into
there
semantic
is an
difference of
lapse.
language usage. Maybe alarming is not the right word.
I would say, is
deeply
higher
disturbing.
up in the scale.
How about deeply
let
disturbing?
Me just add. Well, since it's your show, I'll go along with you, Karan. Deeply disturbing. But let me add that as far as the institutional lapse is concerned, the Indian Army, I think, will do its tactical review. General Dhillon has made his point, so has Ata Hasnain. But I think the institutional lapse, to me as an analyst, looking at this as a student of India's national security challenge, why were the troops in tents?
Well, that has been explained in the papers today. I'll answer that for you, but I don't want to get deflected by it. It's been answered in the papers today that when these sort of transfers happen, you actually have more troops than the barracks can house. And during a 2 or 3 day period, the incoming troops are intense. And similarly, at the other end of the transfer, when those are being transferred, the outgoing troops are also similarly intense. That's been explained, so let's not get deflected on that. Manoj, I want to take a break, but before I do, I'm stopping you, Comrade Bhaskar. Let's not get deflected on that. It has been explained by the Army in the papers today. Manoj, very quickly, give me your sense of what adjective you would use for the series of lapses that seem to have now emerged. General Dhillon said this was very serious, it was embarrassing. General Hasnain says it reflects a mindset that has crept in over the years, where the Army has either become complacent, that was his word, or has begun to accept that the base can be left vulnerable because you secure your forces mainly on the LOC. Given these two gentlemen who've commanded 15th Corps are using such strong language, what adjective would you use to describe the nature of lapses that have emerged?
I would say, a simple word, I would say that a great degree of unprofessionalism is creeping in the sense that because the violence in Kashmir has changed its character in the last 10 years, so there has been complacency certainly. But if you are professional, you follow standard operating procedures all the time. That's what the military is all about. That's what the army is all about.
And
you
that
drill, you
didn't
parade,
happen.
you're doing the same repetitious task day in, day out. And that is not happening.
And that is particularly worrying, because when an army can be accused by someone like you, who is an analyst and whose loyalties and sympathies are with the army in every instance, but if you can accuse the army of unprofessionalism in this instance, not across the board by any means, but in this instance, then that is something that should worry the headquarters of the army chief, the unit and formation commanders at Uri, and all of us as people of India who love our army. Let's take a break and come back and ask what steps are needed to correct this situation, and how do we tackle the complacency or the poor equipment that is clearly affecting the army's capacity to perform. Is this all bad luck, or is it a clear sign of operational inefficiency? Is it a clear sign that operational standards of efficiency have fallen and perhaps been falling for several years? Which of the two?
Well, such incidents are always part of bad luck and complacency. So I would say both. And also, Indian Army is a great organization. I've been hearing about, getting worried and so on. Our leadership organization will ensure that necessary actions are taken to put these lapses absolutely right, so those are not repeated. And also, we got to remember that our troops have been overstretched in that area for years and years. We are falling short of equipment which has not been given to us. We're falling short of officers which are not being given to us. And our defense forces as such are not being given the due honor and respect, so which all affects the efficiency at every level.
So
I'm sure Indian Army...
On that point, General Dhillon, has operational efficiency suffered in recent years, or do you think that's an unfair conclusion to come to?
Yes, it has suffered, because Indian Army main job is to look after the LC, but it is today involved in the valley in a big way. Without the Indian Army, valley would have gone. So it is now overstretched on the line of control, with Pakistan sitting across with the best of equipment. It is fighting insurgency in the valley, which is going on with we don't know what is the end going to be. So we have to understand all that, and it affects the operational efficiency of troops on ground.
Let me bring you in on that critical point. A, do you accept that this is a sign that operational efficiency has suffered? Perhaps because the army is overstretched, perhaps because they're not getting the right sort of officers, perhaps because soldiers in these tense situations are tired because they're human beings. But whatever the explanation, has operational efficiency suffered, and is that why security lapses happen?
Karan, I know I belong to a profession which has all the challenges of the world. To say that we are unprofessional, and I take up Mr. Manoj Joshi on this completely, to even label the Indian Army as unprofessional is something very surprising coming from him. Because he knows what operational constraints the army functions under. You can never have 100%. And I'm fully aware of that. The government is attempting to give you, we are fighting back, we want more. These issues will remain there. In no way is the officer cadre or the Jawan cadre of today lesser in efficiency than what it was of the past.
No, just a moment. So then you're disagreeing with General Dhillon, because General Dhillon categorically said that operational efficiency for a variety of reasons has suffered. Are you disagreeing with him?
No, I do not disagree with him on one issue. This operational efficiency is being affected primarily because of lack of technology and lack of resources.
Now, when you say lack of technology, are you saying that in fact the proper up-to-date surveillance equipment that we need to monitor the fence at the LOC, as well as proper surveillance equipment and night vision equipment to monitor the fence around the army base, those are missing?
Karan, the very fact that in the year 2003, I initiated a security wall for Uri and went back in 2011 and reinitiated it should give you the right answer.
You mean in 8 years' time it hadn't been built?
Nothing had happened.
Well, let me
and
bring
it's
you
not the problem at the corps headquarters anyway. The problem is of prioritization and that of resources.
Let me bring you in on that critical point, Commodore Bhaskar. Both former corps commanders of 15th Corps are saying that operational efficiency is suffering for a variety of reasons, but the most important out of that variety is the missing equipment that they need, up-to-date surveillance equipment, and therefore also the morale of the officers who are stretched and tired. Are not our politicians aware of these problems? I imagine army chiefs have taken them up repeatedly, but are our politicians either failing to understand or do they not give it the priority it deserves?
I think it's the latter, Karan, that even when they are apprised and informed about these deficiencies, they are not willing to act in the manner that the system expects of them. And this is where I was suggesting earlier that more than the tactical lapse which led to the death of these 18 soldiers, it is the institutional lapse, the abdication, I would say, at the higher levels of defense management in this country, which has led to a situation where India faces this proxy war for 26 years, from January 1990 to now. The adversary is getting more refined in terms of how they are trying to inflict terrorism on you, and yet our responses, as Ata Hasnain says, the system does not provide the necessary material resources, nor does it provide the institutional empathy which is required. And the last point I want to make is, I also would not accept the suggestion that the Indian Army is unprofessional and that we arrive at this conclusion because 18 soldiers have been killed in the kind of attack that we saw where the adversary had a momentary advantage because of intelligence or whatever be the reasons. I think on your show, I would like to make this point. The Indian Army's professionalism should not be, I think, tainted in this manner.
Absolutely. I agree with you, but I will uphold the right of my guest to that opinion, and I believe that Manoj's right to that opinion is greater than the feelings of nationalism and patriotism that bring us to defend the army.
Not nationalism, Karan,
Manoj, forgive me, sir. I'm stopping you because Manoj has a right to an opinion. You have a right to differ.
Sure.
But I don't think it's right for us to all gang up on Manoj. And I think the army, from the top to the bottom, is big enough to accept criticism, particularly when security lapses have happened. And remember, General Dhillon not only said these were serious, but said they were embarrassing. And the difference between embarrassment and something being unprofessional is sometimes semantic. So we may differ with Manoj, and I may agree with you rather than Manoj. I am an army son after all, but he has the right to say it. And the army will want that right upheld because the army will want to hear criticism, particularly when it's made a mistake. Our army faces up to criticism without flinching. But very quickly on the last word, I'm not going to ask you to defend your use of the word unprofessional, Manoj. That is your right. You have a right to say it. I want to come to one last thing. Why do our politicians, when they are repeatedly being told equipment is necessary of the best quality, when they can see that the surveillance equipment is no longer the best, why do they fail to act? Why are they, through their failure, permitting these situations to repeatedly occur?
Well, Karan, first of all, I'd like to make the point about the unprofessional. Maybe my choice of word was incorrect. I should have said lack of professionalism. I shouldn't have said unprofessional. And I will still maintain that there was lack of professionalism which led to the lapses.
You have every right to your choice of language,
with regard
Manoj.
to why
it's a
the
free
politicians
world,
repeatedly
and our
fail
army
us.
defends a free democracy and would respect criticism of itself. No army soldier would ever flinch at that word. Now go ahead and answer my question instead. Why do our politicians let down our army?
So the point I'd like to make, why do they let down? You know, they have done it repeatedly. Don't forget that it is the Indian Jawan who had to modify the patka. You know, the patka that he uses is something which was evolved in the field itself. Initially, when the troops were sent to Kashmir, they used to use sandbags at the bottom of their trucks as mine-proof vehicles. As for bulletproof vests, they've yet to come. If you look at the issue of the Insas rifle, which is absolute junk, you know, yet the soldiers are being provided it. You know,
I'm going to stop you there. You've made your point. I'm going to stop you there. I want my two generals to have 10 seconds each to give a message to the political masters who, in a real sense, are not providing the equipment the army needs. General Dhillon, 10 seconds to you, and then General Hasnain. What's your message to your political bosses?
First is the Indian Army, the great organization. Since 47, it has been taking on the enemy with poor equipment, outdated equipment. It has been suffering casualties without raising a voice. It obeyed orders of the government at every forum. Look at what happened in
Sir, 10
at
seconds is
Kargil
over. What is your
1999.
message, sir? What is your message?
My
pointedly?
message is that should look at Uri incident to wake up at the highest level. If
Okay.
we don't wake up, we will suffer more.
This is a wake-up call to Indian politicians in particular, not to ignore the army's requirements. A 10-second for you.
I endorse what General Dhillon has just said, and at the same time I want to convey, please trust your army. Because minor incidents here and there, I'm not calling Uri minor, I'm calling incidents of acquisition, etc. Minor incidents involving the army should not create any kind of a mistrust between the political community, the leadership and the Indian
Absolutely,
army.
sir. Trust your army. That is something every Indian does implicitly every day. Love your army, every Indian does. Stand up for your army, every Indian does. But it's because you trust and love them, don't hesitate to criticize your army when it's lapsed. Criticism is something everyone needs, particularly when they've made a mistake. Whether it's the army, whether it's politicians, or whether it's yourself, or whether it's me. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.